Well, good morning, everyone. I think we're now live. I think I got the cue there, and appreciate you joining us today at the summer webinar series, Business Response in Dramatic Times. And dramatic times they are. And we've got I think, a mixed audience today. We've got those our friends of the College of Business, alumni, students, and I appreciate you joining us today. And it being dramatic times, I know there's also a lot of angst. I know probably especially our students who are wondering what fall is going to look like. That is shaping up as we speak. And I would just want to assure you that we are working hard to make it a very good semester. And as I told each of you in March when we left, and probably the last time I've seen many of you, we are here for you. And I know there is people struggling, that we've got students who have tested positive. There are obviously family members. And so we're thinking about you and we're here for you. And please let us know if there's any way we can help you. We want you to stay in contact. Your faculty and the staff and your advisors, we're here for you. I also want to thank Suzanne Sager and Davis Brown for setting this up. And they're behind the scenes and they've been working hard to make this successful. And they've asked if I can make sure I mention some administrative issues. There will be, there's a Q&A option. So please send those questions in. And then we'll have a time period at the end where we can discuss those, if not as we go along. I think it's been suggested that gallery view is the best. And also the slides from Dewayne will be available for those who are participating. This is the first of a series of 8 very important topics. And I think you have that agenda and we'll review at the end what's coming up next week. But let me just give you a little bit of overview of today. Today is specifically focused on business and racism. And I've honored to have Dewayne Scott join me for this conversation. This is not, this particular talk is the first of 8, but this is not a one and done. I just read a stat that said even among practicing Christians, 38% of white Christians believe racism is a problem. Black Christians practicing, 78%. Quite a difference there. And I would say here in the College of Business that we acknowledge that racism is a problem. It does exist. And we want to help fix what is broken. And this, as I said, this is not a one and done. We're working on steps for the fall, and not just for the fall, but systematic steps that we can do to do our part. I will tell those who in our audience here that the faculty, we've already met. We've been studying, sharing resources. In fact, we kicked it off with a session. It was probably a difficult conversation, but we had the new Dean of Arts and Sciences, David Holmes. And then there was a total of 7 of our business alums who we met on Zoom, all the faculty and staff, and really got to the point, because I think there were some questions we had to answer ourselves before we continued to try to make things better. And so we had a great discussion, I think, on what is racism, what is bias. The question is, does it happen here being in Lipscomb, in our community, and in the business community? And then, of course, the question, now what? And so today is another step in that. And because we want to focus on education and awareness, and I think some of these points will be made by Dewayne. And so today is just another step in trying to go in the right direction. I want to introduce Dewayne, or I'll ask him to give you a little bit of his background. But we met, actually, is by accident at a Leadership Middle Tennessee event. He was a current student in that program. I was alumni from Williamson County, and we were hosting them. And I met Dewayne, And I will tell you, it did not take long to realize that we had a lot in common. Both very passionate about business and both very passionate about God. And I consider him a friend, and he is now part of our College of Business Dean's Advisory Board. And for that, we are very grateful for that. And so, Dewayne, if I can, I'll let you tell a little bit about your background.
Okay. Good morning, Ray. Good morning, everyone. Glad to be here and to kind of be a part of this dialogue this morning. As Ray said, we met through a leadership Middle Tennessee function and have developed a relationship and have continued to grow and cross-section in different areas. My background is that of kind of a business entrepreneurial mix. I'm a UT Knoxville graduate in the School of Economics up there. Left there and spent 15 years in corporate with the Kroger Company, many you're familiar with. They had a regional headquarters here in Nashville. I worked a year in stores after I graduated from Knoxville, came to Nashville, went into a management program, and they've got one of the best in the country. I'll say that as well. Spent a year in stores and then spent the remaining 14 years at their regional headquarters office, kind of navigating my way up through the ranks there, and was one of the department directors before I left there. In '99, decided to leave and do my own thing. So I ventured into the realm of entrepreneurship in 1999, and things were well. There was making that launch was a pretty big career movement. I'm glad I did that. So I did that. I actually did real estate for a couple of years, residential real estate from '99 to 2001, and some commercial with that as well. The next door got open for me was two of my other friends. We started a company, SRS, which really was focused on federal contracting work. So my background was corporate management, business development. The other partner was had spent about 20 years in construction. The other one with the Corps of Engineers. So it was a good mix for us, match, if you will. And through that company, grew that company from a startup to about a little over 50 million in revenue annually when I sold my shares in it, which was last year. So I spent about 18 years, a little over 17 years with that company, made that last year. That company did about 300 contracts for about 15 different federal agencies. Just very successful run. 2008, it was the 250th fastest growing business in America. So we really enjoyed some good, and a lot of my corporate bones and foundation, I got helped me with that. I sold that company in December of last year to go back to the company that I started in '99, TDS and Associates, which is it's a consulting company. So, and I've also, during that time, I've spent about 20 years, a little over 20 years in church leadership. So I've been educational director, deacon, served as an elder there, and have been associate minister for about the last 10 years at the congregation that I served there with. So leadership on the church side is my passion. It's the foundation of my business. So now what I do is taking the corporate experience, the entrepreneurial experience, and church experience, and blended those two, and I help other businesses do that. I recently have a book that I just put out. Ray talks about method, which is this workshop, Stepping Outside Your Comfort Zone, which is a business book, if you will.
I'll hold it up so you don't have to self-promote.
All right. Okay, thank you. Right. But the point was, we had the dialogue about, this topic, business and racism, fits into that kind of model. And we'll talk about that this morning. That fits. That's the reason we had this dialogue. But that's a bigger, stepping outside our comfort zone is something I think it's a growing principle concept that we have if we're all lifelong learners. So this was a good time for it, and I hope that today's dialogue will be helpful as we sort of talk about that particular topic in this business model.
Okay. No, thank you, Dewayne. No, I think it's very impressive, both your passion and experience professionally and your faith and personally. And before we sort of transition, and I know you want to share some of those leadership principles and specifically how they apply to this big issue of racism, I want to ask you two particular questions. And I've got some data here I'll lead off with from the one of the recent issues of The Economist. But the question is what evidence is there that Blacks are disadvantaged in the business workplace? And I know we use the word diversity, and for this, which includes several other groups who are obviously very important. But today we're focused on with the white and Black particular issue.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that data talks about that less than 3% of the Silicon workforce is Black. And even though 13% of the US population, there are only 4 current Black Fortune 500 CEOs. And as a side note, none are female. There's been only 17 in the past 2 decades. And it is said that there's less than 7% of senior corporate jobs and under 8% of all white collar jobs are held by Black leaders. And so there's some background data, but I would say, based on your experience, Dewayne, if I ask you, is there evidence that Blacks are disadvantaged in the business workforce? I don't know if you'd have a response to that.
Yeah, I can personally, right to that response, say a definite yes. Okay, and I think as we sort of talk through the session here this morning, I'll be able to give and share some personal experiences I had on the corporate side. So one of the things that really has helped me is I look at my career, my life into 3 components. The business component, corporate, I call it the corporate experience, the entrepreneurial experience, and the church experience. Okay, and in all 3 of those sectors, I can share experiences where there's definitely, disconnects, disadvantages, and I think we can sort of talk about that, and not in an angry, I'm mad perspective. Just that, I mean, it is what it is. I think we're at a point now. What I'm energized by is the very fact that we're having this discussion with the group, and individuals chose to say, I want to sit and listen to this right now. That tells you that we're at a different place. And I think we'll talk about that. Even when I look in the entrepreneurial field. So I know there's disadvantage. So when I look in the entrepreneurial field, I saw a statistic the other day that was incredible, and you talk about systemic sort of racism. It's something like 78% of all African-American businesses are in the janitorial cleaning sector, which is incredible. So when you look at all the businesses all the African-American businesses out there, it's in the 70%, they're in the cleaning janitorial. Now, if that doesn't send a message, I mean, it's incredible. Even when they go in business, there is here's your lane where you kind of belong. And so it's just, so the numbers are the numbers. I mean, we can talk all day, but when we start looking at numbers like that, there's a reason why it is skewed that when you talk about Silicon Valley, those sort of pieces. Now, there's some things need to happen on the African-American Black side as well, but those type of statistics let you know that, yeah, there's definitely an equal balance there, and how do we start moving toward addressing that.
Okay. No, thank you. Thank you for Dewayne. And thank you, one, for agreeing for today, and then also opening up and sharing. Mm-hmm. And kind of our second lead-in question is that if, based on the premise that if we agree it is a problem, and which I think is a first key step. And right. That's sort of the background that we've approached as faculty and staff is before we start running off and doing posts and slogans and trying to do an action plan, we have to actually, I think, cross that line and admit that it is a problem. And so that leads into the second one, though, but because there is a disadvantage for African-American and Black business people, does that actually impact how businesses perform? and again, I'll kind of lead in some of the data that Dewayne and I had talked about, is that it is said that the top quarter of companies who rank high on diversity outperform significantly the bottom quarter ranked on employee diversity. And this is based on operating profit margins.
Mm-hmm.
We talk a lot, I teach leadership, and obviously we talk a lot about teams. The more diverse teams are, how much more powerful they are, the whole impact on consumers based on a business's reputation with diversity. And then here's two facts that says, or actually points, it kind of makes you think that it is stated that races normally do not mix in the community, in churches, and in the neighborhoods where people live, but it's in business. Business is sort of the force of the race interaction. Mm-hmm. And that those in business, only a quarter of whites, or it says, I'm sorry, 3/4, make sure I get that right, 3/4 of whites in business have no Black people in their social circles. Mm-hmm. So the question is because of this disadvantage, is business performance actually impacted? And I would ask your thoughts on that, Dewayne.
I would definitely say that is a variable. And through what I've personally experienced, what I've seen in dialogue as well, we're going to talk about the comfort zone. And bottom line is, one of the basic principles and facts of business in any aspect is we do business with people whom we like, who we know, whom we trust. That is a fundamental fact in business. You're going to do business with people that you trust and as you know you have a relationship with. Well, if my circle only looks like the people that look like me, then that's where my comfort zones are going to be. And so the whole challenge is can we all acknowledge that's where we are, and then how do we step outside that comfort zone? How do we intentionally, in my book, I talk about there's two ways you get out, and I won't get ahead of ourselves in here. But the point is you've got to be able to acknowledge that fact of I've got to be willing to do something different. I want a different sort of outcome and result. And the fact that high percentage of who I know and who my social circle is are people that look like me is a key piece. I'm gonna throw out a term here that I'm going to end with this very same concept. So I like little snippets, but here's a snippet that I want everybody to think about. And I encourage you to write this down and just we'll revisit this toward the end. And here's the point: different does not mean defective. Different does not mean defective, and we're going to talk about that, because therein I think becomes a challenge that we all have, because we subliminally we sort of do that. We're on either side, but if someone's not like me, then what's not like me, what's different, there's something wrong with it. So so that's part of the paradigm we got to change with our lenses. Different doesn't mean defective. I've got to accept that and believe that before I start stepping out and doing something different about that.
Okay, no, very good. And that's, I think, a great lead in too. I know you had some thoughts, Dewayne, that I want to, kind of step out of your way and let you share some of those and how it particularly applies to business leadership, and then in this case, particular racism in the workplace. And then I would ask our audience to, reminder, based on your machine, and maybe at the bottom of the top, there's a Q&A button. Feel free to ask questions. We'll review those, may be able to address those as we go, or we'll definitely have time at the end to address those. But please feel free to jump in there. And I'll turn it back over to you, Dewayne.
Okay, thanks, Ray. David's going to ask you to throw up some slides there, and I'll sort of talk through this PowerPoint, and as Ray mentioned, we'll be glad to send this to you after today's presentation. I want to talk a few minutes along the topic of stepping outside your comfort zone, okay? Stepping outside your comfort zone. And really the caveat behind that, particularly as people of faith, as believers, I believe behind stepping outside your comfort zone is how God stretches our faith. I think our faith is constantly needing to be stretched. And we'll talk about that. Now, we're going to put this in the context of business and racism, but still, I think at the end of the day, from a spiritual perspective, that's how we are looking at moving to the next level. So go to the next slide for me, if you will, David. So in my book, I want to use the example of the dog and the invisible fence. So when you look at the dog and the invisible fence, you know, I don't know if you've ever seen how that process works, but they put in a device on the dog's neck, and then they determine what the boundary is for that animal. They bury a line below it, and they put those flags up that you see there around the animal. And the animal receives a mild shock if it goes past that boundary. And the whole purpose of why an owner does that is to protect the animal. They want to keep the animal safe. They don't want the animal to be wander off and get lost or do something dangerous in the street, get hit, maybe killed. So the whole purpose of the invisible fence is to protect the animal. They love their pet. So the animal learns to operate inside that area to test the boundary, and then it figures out something painful happens. They go past the flag. Then what happens over a period of several weeks, a few flags are moved over maybe 2 or 3 different series. And the animal will go test where there are no flags, get shot. And then at the very last, there's like 4 flags. And that animal will sort of touch that area. And then finally, it determines, I know my boundary. And then what they will do, they'll remove all flags. And I'm not sure if you've ever seen a dog inside of an invisible fence. And that's kind of like a play on words there, but you haven't seen the invisible fence, but you've seen the effects of it, right? If he's chasing something, it'll run right up to the edge of that fence and will stop and will bark, but it won't go past it, you know. And that's where it learns to operate. That becomes its area of safety, its safety zone. Well, the whole thought process is human beings have invisible fences. And for the sake of this discussion, I want you to think about, let's call them your comfort zone. And just like that animal, we learn to operate inside that comfort zone, okay? It's what we know. It's what we feel safe with, okay? Matter of fact, you probably can operate in it with your eyes closed. We do things such routine. And listen, we don't just have one comfort zone. We have multiple comfort zones in different areas. In this case, we're talking about business and racism, okay? There's a comfort zone that we all have when it comes to racism, okay? And when it comes to how we have operated. Now, here's the thing about it. Outside your comfort zone is where growth, where new opportunity exists. Outside of that. That's why I'm going to be sort of discussion with you this morning for a few minutes here. And I want you to think about, go to the next slide for me, Dave, and I want to share this thought with you as well. So there's really only 2 ways that you get outside your comfort zone. Slide on the left there shows someone is either going to push you outside that comfort zone, or you're going to intentionally step outside or jump outside it yourself, okay? So we're going to sort of begin with the end in mind. The way you get outside your comfort zone is either you're pushed or you choose to step outside. Now, obviously, if you choose to step outside it, you control a whole lot more of the variables. When you're pushed outside it, a lot of those decisions are made for you. A perfect example right now is we're all experiencing COVID-19. We literally, 2-3 months ago, we were pushed outside our comfort zone. Life has changed since COVID-19. There's a lot of things we're doing now that we would not have done had we not been pushed outside it. Now, that's the way we'll see with, I think, with this racism, anything it is in life. When you get pushed outside, you learn some new skill sets. You're stretched in an area that you wouldn't have maybe been stretched in had that not occurred. So there's benefits to it. I call it, for every yin, there's a yang, right? But we're going to talk about this in the context of racism this morning. Push or jump, okay? All right. Any thoughts about that analogy as we sort of go through, start up here, right? Any thoughts there?
No, I think we've got some good questions coming in, but I think I'll save them for just a few minutes from now.
Okay. So David's taking to the next slide, and I'm a big guy on models. I like models. So I want you to think about, the stepping outside your comfort zone as an awareness model, okay? A model, so think about today being just about you, not anyone else, just about you, okay? And I think if anything else, I want you to leave with a greater awareness or some tools to be able to look at yourself and say, okay, as I leave today, what difference does it make, okay? And we're going to be in just a few more minutes, okay? So the model that you're looking at is called the 4 levels of learning, okay? And I've used this in business. I learned it early in my entrepreneurial side. So every time my company would get ready to, because we started out in the construction side, then we navigated out into construction management, then we expanded to disaster response, okay? So that's really what the company started doing. But each time we would step into a new scope of work, I would take our whole team, my management team, and we would go through this process. Every time we ran into something new, even if it was a new customer, it was a new product, a new service we're offering, we would sit down and formally go through this process together because it was just helpful for us. And we'd make fun about it, okay? But it was very helpful. So the first level, that first step on this model is unconscious incompetence, okay? Unconscious incompetence. So in the first level of learning, you gotta admit that you have some unconscious incompetence. You know what that means? You don't even know what you don't know. Okay, so we said, well, if we're starting a new problem, you don't even know what you don't know. You're almost in a state of just total blindness, if you will, when you're starting to pick. And we have to, and listen, even as it relates to racism, you've got to say, okay, what is it I don't even know what I don't know? So you've got to be able to begin there in order to be able to start moving on. So that's the first step that we find ourselves. Then you move to the next level, which is conscious incompetence. What does that mean? That means then you get to the point to where you know what you don't know. Okay? So here's the thing. When you get to the point to where you know what you don't know, now you can start reaching out and getting resources, educating yourself to where you can start saying, what do I need to bring in to make this better, to fix? In our case, if we were going into a new scope of work, is there some expertise we need to bring in we don't have right now, okay? One of my slogans you'll see on the back of my wall here that I like is, and I've always used is, sell your strengths and buy your weaknesses in business. So what you do well, sell it and promote it, but what you don't do well, you bring that in to make yourself be able to get to the next level. Bring in that talent, bring in that expertise, bring in that equipment so you can get, so whatever your weakness is, be willing to reach outside yourself and bring that in to make you a better whatever you want to be, okay? So what you have to know what you don't know so you can go out and pull that in, okay? So in this, as we talk about racism, you start reading and learning, you start looking at statistics, you start talking to people, you start understanding things you don't know. I'm going to share some experience with you in just a moment of things that you don't see. Matter of fact, I'll give you an example here right now. So when I was in Kroger, one of the things I ran into when I would, in the corporate experience, so in Kroger, the headquarters was at 2620 Elmore Pike. There were about 300 people that worked out of that regional headquarters. We serviced about 150 stores in this division, okay? And at that time, the division was doing about 28 to 30 million a week in revenue, okay? So that was what that regional headquarters represented that. And there were about 300 individuals that worked in that office building, administrative and senior management and middle management. And there were probably at the executive management level where I was, there were probably 3 blacks at that level at that time. This is in the mid 80s, okay? And what was interesting about that is, so out of all the people that were there, I'd say 3 blacks in the executive level. There were probably 35, 40 people at the executive level, different positions. And then you had middle management there as well. But what was interesting is so you talk about unconscious incompetence, not knowing what you know. One of the things that sticks in my mind is whenever I would walk in, I had my corner office and we were different locales. But whenever one of my peers that was an African-American black, we'd stop in the hall. I may be coming out of the restroom. He may be walking down the hall, and they were all males. Those 3 were. We'd stop and we'd talk. And inevitably, you know what happened? We'd stop and we'd start having a conversation. And one of my peers would come by, white, and would say, and they were kidding. They didn't mean anything by it. But you know what they'd say? They'd say, what are y'all up to? And we'd laugh about it, and they'd go on. And, you know, and if you stayed there a few minutes, someone else come out and said, all right, y'all, better break it up. You know, I mean, it was subtle, but no one, they didn't realize. Now, if I was stopping and talking with a white counterpart, there'd be no discussion about it. If 2 whites were sitting there discussion, there'd be no discussion about it. But the fact that 2 African-American blacks sat and started having conversation, that's subtle. So it was like unconscious, and they didn't know what they didn't know, okay? And those are real subtle sort of things. Now, God forbid, and this happened before, we would do this. If something happened, 3 of us got in the hallway, it's like, oh, they're plotting something, you know? I mean, it was literally like, and we would even say ourselves, you better break up because we're gonna get some folks nervous. You're sitting here having a conversation with 3 of us. So those are just subtle things that you don't think about, but folks, they are what they are. And once again, this model kind of helps us talk about where am I? Am I at the unconscious incompetence? I'm at the conscious incompetence. The 3rd level is really where you want to operate is conscious competence. That's when you know what you know. And when you're at that know what you know level, you've learned some things and you start responding to make it better, whatever it is. If it's a product, if it's a process, if it's an environment, if it's an atmosphere, if it's a tone I need to set, you know what you know and you do what you can do to influence that. Now, what you have to be careful with, and I've got to start by that level, because at the 4th level is unconscious competence. So at that level, you have to be careful that arrogance doesn't set in. We call it corporate arrogance. And you can say, well, I don't need to, no one tell me I've been there, done that, you know, and you have to be careful. Matter of fact, it's been proven that pilot error happens at that level more than anything. A pilot who's flown thousands of times looking at the instruments, and the instruments are saying one thing to it, particularly private pilots, and the instruments are saying one thing, and they're looking at visual and saying, well, I've done this a whole lot, and they end up crashing because they're not watching the instruments, which is the process, checking off the instruments, going through that process, not ever getting away from that, not getting so arrogant where you say, I can trust my gut rather than the process. So as we talk about the 4 levels of learning, I think this model is good to constantly, okay, where am I in this model? And what do I need to be doing?
Hey, Dewayne, if I could ask you, I know you had told me a story, because as you go up this ladder and you talk about conscious incompetence, you know, which is part of what we each need to think through, the self-awareness. Mm-hmm. You know, what do we do? And of course, then how can we, as we learn and educate ourselves on how to do it right? But you had told a story where I thought it took quite a bit of courage, where you had brought up basically a bias incompetence at a board meeting. And I don't know if you feel comfortable, maybe you can just share that and the kind of reaction you got, which was then obviously an example that they did not want to become conscious of it.
Right. Yeah, sure, right. This is another corporate experience that I had with Curtin Company. So at the level that I left program, I was the director of deli bakeries for the division. So I had all the delis and the bakeries, and then you had someone that was the director of grocery, director of non-food, director of meat, director of seafood, we were in this level. And one of the guy that was over grocery had been there for a long time. I won't call his name, but I was, at that time, I was probably in my late 20s, and he was probably 62, 60, so he was a significant age difference at that level. He would always call, he would say it in a very subtle sort of way, but we'd be talking, he said, boy, such, boy, such, you know. And I got to be honest with you, it bothered me. It really bothered me. He'd say Dewayne at times, but then he'd come back and say, boy, you need such, boy, you know. And I started watching him to say, is he doing this to anyone else? Is he saying this to anyone else? Because I'm the only African-American black at that level. And I noticed over a period of time, he's not. So I'd see him in the hall, we'd be out, we'd be having department head meetings. And so one day we were in a executive meeting. We had not only ourselves, we had our president, both the vice presidents there, everybody was there, was in the meeting. And he used that term again with me. He just said, I made a comment, he said, boy, such. And in the meeting, I just stepped out and said, and I said his name, I said, I need you to stop calling me boy. And folks, you could have heard a pin drop. And he said, what do you mean? I said, I don't know if it's conscious, unconscious, but I'm just saying, you always use the term boy when you're referring to me. And I want you to call me Dewayne, just like you call everyone else in by their name. And that'll be fine. Just don't put any adjective. Just don't call me. He said, well, I don't mean anything by him. And matter of fact, several other department heads, so he doesn't mean anything about it. I said, well, then just don't say it anymore. And so here's the challenge with it. And I told Ray, my takeaway on that was this. So it got quiet. He never did it again. Okay. I had a couple of my peers come back and say, you okay? You okay? I said, yeah, I'm fine. You know, I mean, after the meeting, you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. You know, and he didn't mean anything. Okay. All right. Well, then he doesn't need to say it anymore, you know. And then even at my evaluation with the vice president, that incident came up. When we talked about my value, he talked about my sensitivity. I said, well, I'm going to politely disagree with you, with my vice president. I said, because I'm just saying there was a subliminal bias slur that he was using that everybody in there was comfortable with until I said something about it. So one of the challenges I told Ray is, the challenge is systemic racism becomes so normal that one of the challenges blacks have is you are very hesitant to step up and to say something. Because if you say something, then you get put into a category of an angry black man, okay? And then you have this stigma you have to sort of deal with because you dealt with an issue, and listen, you dealt with it front. I mean, I was polite, I didn't curse, I just said, here's what I need you to do, you know? But I'm just saying the repercussions of the very fact that that very incident showed up on my review, we had to talk about it, speaks to systemic racism. And matter of fact, I had the discussion with my vice president, and he said, well, we don't see it that way. Okay, all right. Now, I'm not going to make him see it, but the fact that we had that discussion was one of those that talks about, and as simple as that is, that creates so here's what happens, folks. Then blacks will tend to talk about those incidents among themselves rather than to the white counterparts of those in power. So that creates a whole nother level of underground currents, and I call it what it does, folks. If you don't deal with it, it creates toxic environments. So.
No, thank you very much, Dewayne. I know it's asking a lot of you to have you share to. Especially you don't even know who's in the audience. So I appreciate you trusting us to share your thoughts. If it's okay, I'll read one of these questions that we have from one of our students here. And I think it ties in a little bit of what you just spoke about, but it says, what has been your biggest struggle as a Black business leader and then some advice to Black business students as they're trying to progress through college, they're trying to learn business, and then go into a future career.
Okay. So I would say this. So I left corporate in '99, and so life was good. So here's the thing: you can get trapped into loving that. So when I left corporate, I was at a level, and I say this not in a bragging sort of way, but listen, because you're at that level, you get to go, because the grocery industry is all sponsors, right? You're buying Kellogg's and P&G and all the major brands, and life is nice. So you go to all the Super Bowls and that you want to go to, and Final Fours and World Series and Disney. I mean, it's a nice, comfortable world. Coca-Cola, we do once a year golf outings at Scottsdale, Arizona. So that's nice. Okay. So here's the thing about it: you're enjoying that, and because the fear of losing that comes about. Did I lose you right?
There you are. There you are.
Okay. And the fear of losing that, a lot of times you will chunk and not say things because you don't want to rock the boat. So you have to have. So one thing I say, you have to have and so bottom line, what has to ground you is your faith. I think your faith has to be the foundation of everything you do. Okay. One of the concepts I use in business is this: when values are clear, decisions are much easier. When values are clear, decisions are a whole lot easier, because if you say this is where I am and what I stand on, then you know when a choice comes, it's much easier for you if you're having to deliberate. But I don't know if I want to do that or not. Okay, so that I'm saying. So when I was planning on leaving, I think that's a thought there as well. Here's another point. So when I left corporate and went into the entrepreneurial field, I still ran into racism challenges. Matter of fact, now, so one of the things I was looking forward to is I thought, well, I'm going to get to create my own environment, and I'm going to get to create an organization that I lead the organization, and it's going to be a diverse organization. You know, I think at the highest point, SRS had about 600 employees in 6 different states that were operating. So we had built a nice organization, and one of the things I was just so proud and thankful of is the diversity that existed within the organization and the values we stood upon. And you got to change some of that. But you know what? The company has to deal with. You deal with racism from even the customers you have to deal with, right? So that doesn't change. I mean, so you don't. So really, it boils down to, how am I going to deal with it? Okay, how am I going to? And one of the things I tell folks is I think you're constantly having to conform on some level. Part of it is you learn to adapt and to conform. So one of the things I did in the entrepreneurial side as a Black businessman is I learned the value of teaming and joint venturing. Matter of fact, the reason the company did as well as it did is because probably 40 to 50% of our business was through teaming and joint ventures. And then the rest of the company just performed solo. So we strategically aligned ourselves with companies that we brought value to the table. We would do joint ventures, and you could do more. So once again, when you're teaming joint ventures, you got to make sure that value alignment is there. You can't just team and joint venture with anyone, because there's toxicity in some. There's businesses that I knew didn't value diversity. So I was not going to team and joint venture and expose my team to a toxic environment, because when you team and joint venture, you're bringing 2 different organizations together. So you still have to deal with that. Okay. You even have to deal with that even still within the church in leadership. There's an environment we talk about. You've heard the term before. Some of the greatest segregation takes place at Sunday morning, because that's, I guess, pre-COVID, right, in the United States. But the point is Black and white churches, okay, predominantly, and so let me go down this road just a minute as relates to the church, okay. I think, tell me, you don't know what you don't know. So one of the things I think white Christians in the church have to understand is I don't know that it's a bad thing for there to be a predominantly black church and predominantly white church. I don't think that's necessarily bad. I don't think we have to all blend to say, because here's why I'm saying that. There's an experience that the black Christian has that's different. And it really comes from the slave experience, okay? Because here's what happened. Because of slavery and because of the oppression and how the man was dehumanized, the black male was in slavery, the church was the only place where he could go and be the man. That's when he was in control, and you see a lot of emotion. They put on their Sunday best. Matter of fact, even in the white, it's so funny. And I have plenty of white Christian friends, many, okay? And we laugh about that. I said, so you notice how even in the white church, there's a more casual dress than it is in black African churches, black churches of Christ, is because that tradition still has ran over. That's when people put on their Sunday go to meet their very best, and that's what church represents. And some of that even still carries over, okay? So there's a different emotional experience. There's a different background that's led to that point, okay? And what probably blacks are fearful of is I don't want to be under that same system, okay? If I blend, and there's a fear that's sort of there. So I'm just saying there's a why to that. And folks, don't read me wrong. I'm not saying we shouldn't fellowship when we're brothers one of another. We are. I'm just saying understanding why things are why they are helps us to have an acknowledgement of even in the church. So it exists as a black man in the church, in entrepreneurship and in business. That's something that you have to learn to adapt with. And I'll say this to you as well. What's happening now is a whole different level of awareness that I think is different, and you've heard this before, than we've ever seen. I think that's going to be good and healthy for us, the very fact that we're having this sort of format here. Ray, we're close. How much time do we have left?
Yeah, I think technically we're allowed to use the system 15 minutes past, but I know also I want to respect everyone's time who may be on a lunch break or signed up for an hour.
Right.
And I want to make sure, if you have, and I know you have some great material, and I'm glad we can share the slides, but, and you may want to give you an opportunity to kind of wrap it up. I will too. If it's okay, I'll go ahead and ask another question.
Okay, go ahead.
From our audience, because I know you and I have met several times, but I'm making notes. I am learning, and okay. I appreciate this. Let me read one here. It says, hi, Dewayne. Being a millennial, I still see that systematic racism is prevalent today. And I know, Dewayne, you've brought that up. Mm-hmm. And again, I know this is such the issue. Here we are locked into 1 hour when this is a multiple hour day week discussion. Mm-hmm. But it says, although diversity and inclusion is a hot trend, mostly that allows people of color to get in the door, but not excel to the positions that they are truly qualified for. What are some remedies that you feel should happen to correct this? Something, especially that the upcoming generation can help fix.
Yeah, okay. Well, I would say this way. One of the things that I am extremely optimistic about are the millennials. I think there is a level of, because listen, I've got definitely two children are in that age group, okay? The millennial age group. One is a little outside of that. And I see a level of interaction, and I'm talking about social interaction, that we never had. I think it goes right back to that experience of you're going to do business with people that you know. You're going to be willing to give opportunities to people that you trust. So I think the very fact who this individual was that asked the very question speaks to that. There's just a different paradigm with that. I believe this, and I talk on I use a lot. I think we all have these lenses, okay, that we're looking at, okay, and I think, and Ray, I'm going to use a model here real quick that's probably on the slide there. So here's what's happening every day to each and every one of us, okay. So every day, what's happening, so think about this with your own self throughout the day. So what's happening is an event occurs, something happens. And then whatever that occurs, you then have to place meaning on that event that occurred. And then based on the meaning you put, you have a feeling associated with that. And then that feeling will lead to a behavior, okay? And where the key is right here. The meaning with how we interpret different things, how we interpret, how we make meaning of different pieces, because we all are constantly making meaning of. We're making meaning of events. You know, and of course you got to filter how much of the media that you get, but you're getting feedback, and how the lens that you use to interpret what's going on is going to determine how you feel and how you respond to it. If I can turn on and have lenses of empathy, and really that's a biblical principle, look not every man on his own thing, but every man on the things of others. That's an empathetic set of lenses. Do unto others as what you would have them do unto you. In other words, you're considering, the Bible says, let each esteem other better than themselves. So that's a spiritual principle. And I believe that's the way business is going to be affected. And I think so I think the social interaction of being able to get learn people more and spend time with each other in a social setting is the starting point of that change taking place. I mean, at the corporate structure of racism it didn't happen overnight. It's not going to change overnight. But I think the millennials is where the whole system can change, and where I see hoping that happening.
Oh, very good. And Dewayne, I want to, I'll turn it back over to you and kind of we can get to a kind of a summation if you can.
Okay.
I know this is great stuff, and time goes too fast. I want to address quickly, though. I don't want to take away your time, but there was one question here I'd like to just respond to briefly. And it says, what steps are being taken by the College of Business to include more discussions about race, diversity, and inclusion in the classrooms? There needs to be continued discussions with actions of change to be truly successful. And so I want to acknowledge that, and I just want to say amen. That is that is absolutely the truth. And if we had a lot of time, we could probably discuss how we got to where we're at now. But I would say we are committed to doing better. We are committed to help fix this. And this is a long term, as I started out saying, this is just one step. It's not a one and done. And in fact, it's kind of separate from the, I think, 8 very good presentations that Suzanne has set up on the schedule over the summer. We're wanting to take this particular theme and continue this, and it may be kind of a separate discussion that we will continue to have on campus and in Zoom webinars. It is so important. I will bring up, this is not a matter of pointing out that we have it right, but I'll mention one stat here just to kind of show how we're trying to be intentional. In 2017, when we look at our major speakers in the College of Business, and that's chapel and other ceremonies that we have, we had only 10%, 80% of our speakers were diverse. Diverse is a broad range of people of color and gender, and only 10% represented Black. And it goes up in the last 4 years to 40, 30, and then in 2020, which got cut short, it was 100% of speakers were diverse and 50% Black. So we're trying to be intentional, but we're going to do better. And we're talking about also in the classroom, classroom speakers, classroom cases, classroom textbooks, to ensure that we give the whole perspective. So I just want to address that briefly. And of course, I'll be glad to talk about that more offline, phone call, email, text. But it's a great question. Dewayne, I think for our time, I know the time probably has just crossed that 1 o'clock magic hour, but let me just throw it back to you. And if you kind of want to sum up or a last thought you'd like to share.
Yeah, Ray, thanks for the opportunity again. And I would just like to challenge each of you that for this to get better, it starts with me, it starts with you individually. And it's going to mean literally willing to step outside your comfort zone. We can all stay where we are and be safe and comfortable there and rationalize why we need to stay where we are. But the true change happens when we step outside that comfort zone. So I want to challenge you to do that. I want to leave with the thought as well that you embrace the thought process or the concept that different does not mean defective. Okay, I think that's a starting point for us, because if you have to have those lenses on in order to be able to be willing to say, well, I need to be more inclusive. I need to be more, because it's and once again we talk about the silence. We got to talk about how that has caused a lot of pain in people's lives, because there was silence, and what I'm seeing now is less of that. So even to step out and not to be silent, that's stepping outside your comfort zone. And when do you start that? You start that now. So I'll leave you with this thought. Start by doing 1 push-up. Start by drinking 1 cup of water, right? Start by reading 1 page. Start by making that 1 sale. Start by walking that 1 lap. Start by writing the first paragraph. Start by making the first choice and decision. Start that today, and then repeat tomorrow. That's what I leave everyone with. That's the way this thing's going to change, and that happens with you. Thanks for your time. Okay.
Thank you very much, Dewayne. And I've acknowledged we could go so much longer, and this will not be the end of this very serious discussion. If anyone would like to, again, reach out to me or Davis and Suzanne, who you signed up with, if you have their contact info, feel free to reach me, or I can connect you to Dewayne if you want to continue this particular conversation. But thank you very much for today. I think the slide has gone up about next week. Next week, there's 2 presentations, Leanne Smith, 5 Issues Affecting Women in the Workplace, and then Brian and Burton on the financial and tax implications of COVID. Obviously, it is dramatic times, and there are many, many issues that we're all facing individually, as a community, and personally in business. But today is no doubt a very serious concern that we hope to help tackle. Thank you very much, Dewayne.
You're very welcome.
Thanks each of you for giving us your time today.